Hey guys, so today I have a small, tiny little update to ColorLogic, and I've already pushed it out to customers, but I want to show everyone because I think it's something that you can possibly learn from. So as a quick review, when you use ColorLogic, when you pick any of these looks like Pulse Wave or something like that, that's a really strong one. But let's say you pick a Slide, whatever, you get grades and they're super smooth, they're really beautiful, and when you open up the folder that's created by each preset, by each action, you get the core base RGB, which is the actual color grade itself, the main part of it. There's different modifiers above that, and some of the actions do a color wash of gradient map just to add a little extra something. But when you look at it, you'll notice that the color grade is created via curves on the R, G, and B channels. And people say, oh yeah, no, I get it. I've played around with RGB curves and you get some kind of looks and it's cool. But most people will admit that it's a little bit abstract and confusing to color grade with RGB curves. And it is, because you're modifying a curve on one channel and then that affects the other channel. So if you change blue, green gets affected because, yeah, you're pulling and pushing is what's happening. And it's not always obvious. However, the upshot of color grading with curves is that you get that beautiful sense of like smooth transitions across all your color grades. You just have to understand how to leverage it. Now, one of the reasons why I created ColorLogic is because we can quickly go through RGB curves looks. I can talk curves, looks, and stack them and modify them and mix and match presets, and you can explore color quickly with the power of RGB curves. But I always like to help and teach where I can, so I've created a couple of small things. I'm going to delete that preset, and I've got a curves layer here, reminding you that curves are rad. There's nothing going on it. But people ask me all the time, how do I color grade with curves in a way that's easier to understand? The biggest question I get is, what if I want like cyan highlights and like a reddish purple shadows and blended in the middle? What do I do? And people get the basic the basic idea, of how to push and pull these things. So pull up the red, pull down the cyan, and they're like, oh, okay, well, if I want cyan, then I can do that. And that sort of works, right? But people find it to be a little bit messy and non-intuitive. So what I've done is I've created a few presets, 3 in fact, that should get you started to make even the simplest change. So for example, right now you think, for example, I want to do the cyan highlights and a red sort of shadow. Okay, cool. Let's look at our presets. It's all, in other words, all the channels, including the main one, because let me explain that real quick. This RGB, which I just call luminosity, because of course you can brighten and darken with it, all that does is it moves every channel equally. Unless you change the blend mode to luminosity, now you're only affecting luminosity, okay? That's just a calculation with blend modes, and that's awesome, but something else. So just understand that RGB moves every channel relative to the changes that each one has, up and down, or however you want to make the changes, right? That's why it's called RGB as opposed to Luma. This is a little bit different in lab. For those of you who work with lab, obviously the channels are different, but we're only talking about RGB right now. So let's talk about our presets. Let's go back up to the top. We have all of them 1 node start, all of them 3 node start, and all of them 7 node start. So let's go to 1. 1 puts a node right in the middle, exactly at 128 and 128, allowing a perfectly neutral start, not just on the main 3 channels RGB, but every independent channel has a node there. Why is that important? Well, for one thing, it can help you kind of create those cross looks, if you will, right? So you have a node in the middle, perfectly centered. You don't have to worry about shifting that midpoint, and you can pull down on the highlights and make it more cyan. See that? And of course, the red goes up automatically because you don't have nodes controlling that, but that's okay. Whether you want that or not, it's a different story. Look at that. I pulled up red, pulled down cyan, and I get from out of camera, or rather out of capture 1, and I get a grade. And that's awesome. But we also have, if you want more control, we have the 3 node start. What does that do? Well, as you can see, we have that center neutral node again, but then we have perfectly placed in between nodes from the input and output ones on the outside. Okay, so what does that mean? That means if I pull down, I'm still on red, for example, if I pull down cyan, this node keeps the red locked in. So I don't add red to the shadows. I simply add cyan to the highlights. And if I go down to blue, same story here, right? So then I can pull down into yellow and get yellow shadows while the other nodes are controlled. See that? Now you can do that, of course, on your own, but it's a little tedious. Type in the numbers exactly, and I have it all calculated so they're perfectly set up. So now we have shadows getting a little bit of that yellow tinge, and I've got nothing on green, and I've got a little bit of cyans on the highlights. And of course, off and on, we can see that's exactly what's happening, okay? So let's go ahead and reset that one, because we can also do some other things, because I want you to keep this in mind too. You're gonna have to play with it, because if you go, for example, let's go to the green. If you go and go, I want some purples on my shadow, so I'm gonna pull down. Cool, got a little bit of purple. By the way, when you're color grading with RGB curves, usually less is more. Like if you start pulling like this, and maybe those looks can be cool and you can blend it in, don't get me wrong, but you'll find that even a change like that is powerful. See, now we have awesome purple in the shadows, right? Okay, so what I'm gonna say is if you go to red and then push it to cyan, etc., and then finally go to blue, and then you're gonna push the mids towards yellow or something like that. Keep understanding that as you do this, other things will change. So if you set your shadows, where did I set them? On the green. If you set your shadows on the green and then you move the blue, you're going to see that push and pull that curves do. You move one channel up, you move another channel down. Well, there's something in between. The channels relate to one another. That's actually a benefit, because you get that beautiful grading transition, that smoothness that I'm talking about. In fact, let me zoom in and turn off these presets. We don't need to see them. Okay. Even with a heavy color grade like that. Okay. Now, another thing too, as I forgot to mention this, but in newer versions of Photoshop, you'll notice that when you go to the channels, you'll have that gradient showing that this direction is a purple-ish and this direction is greenish. Didn't used to have that. And in lab, we still don't have that. So this gives you an idea. As long as you understand that, yeah, you can add cyan to the highlights doing this. And yeah, you can add purple to the shadows doing this, but the channels pull and push. Don't let that frustrate you. Do it subtly, and you'll see you'll start creating beautiful looks. On top of that, if you find a look that you really like, you can always save that preset, saves curves preset, and then you can have it amongst your ColorLogic presets, and you can use your own mixing and matching to, with the looks that you use with ColorLogic. Or if you just want to try it on your own, you know how to do it there. Now, another thing, we have yet one more, and that's the all 7 node start. That this is what I use when I'm actually color grading to create things for ColorLogic, because it gives you finite control. Okay. Now it requires more work on your part, but you get finite control. So for example, that cyan that I added to the highlights, if I pull this node down, I'm adding cyan to the very top highlights. In fact, this image doesn't have a whole lot of it, so you can't even really see it. But if I go down to blue, for example, I can add blue to the deepest colors. See, now it's not on these. That could be useful for you too. You probably don't need more. People have asked me, hey, is there a 9 node or, an 11 node? You don't really need all that, because then you start moving multiple nodes at the same time to get one look. This is just to dial in exactly what you want. To give you a counter example, let's go back to the 3 node, which is probably the most commonly used, as opposed to, let's say I want to make blue shadows, as opposed to pulling it up here. And you get some variation that you can kind of pull the curve tendency towards the mids or towards the shadows. You get some variation, but as you can see, initially I have blue everywhere that's a little bit shadowy, as it were. But if I use a 7 node start, and then I pull up just on the deepest part like I did earlier, now we're getting a blue right there, only in the deepest shadow. So off and on. So really that's what it's about. If you start pulling the curves randomly, it's literally like closing your eyes and sifting your hand through a box of things. You're going to find something eventually, but you're not really sure what you're doing. Having these nodes set up already for you kind of gives you a little bit more of a logical way to go. So if I go back to, let's say, green, and I want to add green in this portion of the highlights, pretty strong, and then just a little bit on the top of the highlights. There we go. Now we got blue and a little bit of green. That's too much. A little bit of green right there. Very subtle look, but nonetheless it works. And let's say I go to red and I want to add, a red punch in the middle. You can see it happening. See that? That red punch in the middle. And of course, if you pull it too hard, curves break down the way they break. That's the whole point here. Use them subtly. I'm going to add actually a little bit of cyan. And just for fun, I'm going to warm up the highlights a bit. Okay? There we go. So you can see how now, if I were to view the main RGB, we have that curved look that a lot of the ColorLogic looks have, because that is how I start to grade with RGB curves. I find that push and pull nature of RGB curves, which most of the time you're going to start with 3-node, my recommendation. I use a 7-node when I want very specific things. 3-node can get you a lot of things done. But when you color grade with curves, that push and pull, to me, is very exciting because it creates things that maybe I didn't consider, and it kind of keeps my mind in check. Oh, I want really cyan highlights. And then I pull and I get the cyan highlights and I'm really excited about it. And then I start doing other things and things will change. Actually, let's go to a kind of a purple there. Okay. And things start to change on me. And maybe that, there we go, right there. Cool. Things have happened. The way the channels, like I said, the interplay of the channels is already happening in a beautiful and wonderful way. And you get amazing transitions, amazing grades with curves. So that is what I've sent out today to ColorLogic customers, and it's going to come with it. It's just these 3-node starts. By the way, if you are simply working with the 1 node in the middle, you can get a lot done too, but keep this in mind too. If you put curves on luminosity blend mode and start with a single node, your contrast boost will not darken or brighten the image in the middle. It won't do a mid-range shift, and you'll get really even contrast boosts or really even contrast reductions if you do it like this. So that single node for all the channels is also used for contrast situations. So just keep that in mind. Again, we have these right here, 1, 3, and 7 node starts. It's really a great way to help you understand and learn a little bit about color grading with RGB curves. And Photoshop's, Adobe's change of adding this color gradient across the actual channels is really good. I don't remember exactly when they added that. It wasn't like last week or anything, but years ago we didn't have that. And it just kind of helps. So again, you get that green in the highlights if you want it. Oops, I'm in luminosity blend mode. It won't work. So let's go back to normal or color, right? And then I can go to blue and add blue into the shadows. And now I've got a green and blue. You can see it right there, green and blue sort of color grade. I'm doing it really heavy for the demo, guys. Most of the grades you're going to be happy about. You're not going to want to push them too hard unless you do, because certainly ColorLogic has a bunch of crazy grades. For example, stereo. That one's super strong, but the entire point of that, of course, if you look at the curves, they're crazy. The entire point of that is to potentially dial in the opacity that you want. So check that out. Play with those presets. Tell me what you guys think. Again, we have the 1 node, 3 node, and 7 node. It's a great way to get things done when you want to learn about color grading. And even if you do color grade with curves, these give you really, really fast starts to get things going quickly to make those tiny micro detail adjustments when you're doing amazingly smooth grades with curves.